And we're live. Hello and welcome to the very first Federal Way Symphony Facebook Live event. My name is Tony Pagliocco and we appreciate you joining us today for Ask the Maestro with Symphony Artistic Director Bryan Davenport. So we're going to get to the questions to Maestro Davenport in just a second. But first I just wanted to point out the donate link that's right above our heads. And today is Giving Tuesday, and essentially it's a national day to celebrate philanthropy. And in partnership with PayPal, Facebook is providing $7 million in matching funds today. So we're not messing around. There's a good chunk of change out there for a lot of good organizations, but the best one is right here, the Federal Way Symphony. So they are waiving all transaction fees, so 100% of your donation is going to go directly to the Federal Way Symphony. If you've ever had the opportunity or engaged with the Symphony, you know how great, you know how fantastic it is. And so it's a really, really good cause, and so we hope that you click on that link and donate for us today. But right now is we're going to get to your questions, and we're going to start with you. Good afternoon, Maestro Davenport.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Just fine, thank you.
How was your Thanksgiving? Was it good?
Good, yes.
Yes. I'm still...
Pecan pie.
There we go. And
With double the amount of pecans.
I can't do pecan pie, so it doesn't work for me. Also out there real quick, our viewers can ask questions by typing them into the comments. And so what we're going to do is we'll just go back and forth a little bit, and if someone wants to come in and have some questions, I might stop and ask you a couple of things there. But let's start off with just some general conversation. This is the 35th anniversary of the Symphony, and although I believe it actually began a few years earlier, I'd sort of want to know, can you tell me about how the Symphony came to be?
The Symphony started in Bryan with a group from the Highline High School that graduated in a very, very robust orchestra program, and they wanted to stay together. And so for a number of years, the group stayed together. They were volunteers, and they named themselves the Highline Civic Symphony. And it had its ups and downs. The community was a little bit lackluster in its support, and there came a moment when some of the players who were from Federal Way suggested that the group perform in Federal Way to see if there might be more community interest, more audience, more supporters of the symphony. And I remember we came down and did a concert in Decatur High School, and over 200 people showed up, and that was, it was a big surprise. Where did they all come from? And so over the course of a year or two, we transitioned from being in Bryan to Federal Way, and then when Federal Way became a city and formed the cultural committee.
The commission, yeah.
Yeah, and they started giving us money with the expectation that we would improve the quality of the group.
Right.
That was back in the 90s, and we've been on this pathway ever since.
That's really interesting, considering the fact that it started in Bryan, but
it moved down here.
And they didn't get to claim it, we took it.
Right. And there was one lady who came to me who lived in Normandy Park, and when we announced that's what we were doing, she called me up and said she really regretted it because she felt that area could have used a good symphony, and now we were moving out. I said, well, ma'am, the board was only members of the symphony. There was very little community activity supporting it, but maybe they would have gotten around to it. Who knows?
Well, their loss was our gain.
That's right.
Now, after 35 years, we're not talking chump change. We're talking quite a bit of time here. Have you found it easier to program the events, or? And by your laughter, I'm thinking that you already have an answer to that.
In this business, there is nothing that is easy.
Fair enough.
Actually, you asked about programming.
Yep, when you program a season.
That is the most difficult task for me personally to do.
Why is that?
It's more difficult to put together. When I say difficult, I'm talking about brain time, think time, research time. That's much more difficult than, say, conducting the concerts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the first reason is you must have whoever's doing it. In this case, I bear that responsibility. It's in the bylaws. The music director is answerable for the programming and for the musicians who play in the group. That was made very clear in the bylaws, and very interestingly, Rudolph Bing, who managed the Metropolitan Opera for about 20 years after the Second World War, a real famous opera director. He's in the history books for what he did in that epic. And someone asked him once, what was the basis of his authority in the Metropolitan Opera? And he said, I decide which operas we do, and I then engage the singers. That's all I do. There's huge staff to do everything else. But he said, that's what I'm answerable for. And then he had talk about Maria Callas and the people he get down on his hands and knees and beg them to come and sing for no money, that sort of, all his problems. Well, in any case, that's my responsibility, is the programming.
Yeah.
And first of all, you must have an intuition for the taste of the audience. Okay. And when outside people give me their opinions, advise me, ask me to consider certain works, most people do not realize the importance of what does the audience want to hear.
Right.
Okay? And I over the years, I think I'm pretty much in tune with my audience. It's not homogeneous at all. There's a core probably of 50% that want to hear traditional symphonic repertory, Beethoven, Brahms, etc.
Yeah.
Then there's another 30 or 40% who wants to see things that maybe a little bit off the beaten track or unusual, or maybe more pops oriented.
Right.
And then the last group doesn't know what it wants, but it does want variety. That's the word when we do surveys or ask people, they say, we want variety. I hear that word more than anything.
Right.
So, and then when you finally turn around to picking pieces and plugging in, and you, it's like putting together a meal, a dinner party. You come up with the steak, you come up and then you say, no, we'll have to have chicken because we're going to have this for the soup. Well, the soup has to match the salad. It's the same with the season. So you mix and mix and mix and match, and you have to look at the soloists you can get and the level that they can play at and what works they want. Sometimes you can get a really good soloist for not much money because they want to try out a work with you. And other times if I want the work, then, and they don't want to do it, but I still want them as a soloist, the tables are turned and I have to pay them more to get what I want out of them. All of that kind of thing is going on.
And it's funny that you mentioned that food analogy, because I was thinking the same thing, is that you have people coming up to you and telling you what they want, but even though they don't really know what they want. So it's sort of like, you know, a whole bunch of people liking hamburgers coming in saying, we want hamburgers, and then you give them hot dogs. They're like...
Well, I give them steak.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I make hot dogs. I mean, you make steak.
And I give them roast beef.
So you're Gordon Ramsay and I'm the line cook down at the casino. There we go. So before we go to our next question, I just want to remind you, yes you, that it is time for you to make that donation. That link right above, because it is, like I said, Giving Tuesday. And if you're just joining us now, welcome to the Federal Way Symphony's first Facebook Live event. We're doing this for Giving Tuesday. We have a shot at getting a piece of $7 million from PayPal and Facebook. I'm accompanied by the most excellent Maestro Bryan Davenport, and we've been just having a little bit of conversation and Q&A, right?
Yes.
So in terms of, like, and we talked about the symphony's background, but, like, more in terms of, like, your background. Like, how did you choose music as a profession? How did it become your passion? Like, you know, let me...
My parents were musicians. And actually, when you go, if you go into the orchestra and get to know the players in the orchestra, we have probably 40 to 50 regular players. I would say that 80% of them are partnered with other musicians. And certainly 80% had parents who were musicians. Mm-hmm. It seems to be a family genetic, there's a strong family genetic component, okay? And my father was he went opera singer. He studied at the San Francisco Conservatory back in the late 20s. And my mother was his accompanist. And they fell in love and married. And so I grew up, and he sang a lot. It was in Walla Walla. He would sing at churches and weddings, and if they did productions like at the college or something, he'd participate in that. And she was very active in accompanying wherever he went. Sometimes, my aunt told me, sometimes he would have another lady from church, and they'd sing duets, and my mother was always very jealous, sitting at the piano playing it while she watched my father flirt with, with the woman that he was singing his duet with.
As the keys got harder and harder, dun, 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 yeah.
But she started teaching me piano. She didn't teach violin. My older brother studied violin. My next younger brother studied voice. I was the pianist. And I've always, it's my personal relationship to music. It's very personal. And I love all kinds of music. It's not just what you call classical. The classical field is as varied as anything. You can love Handel and you can love, Philip Glass. They're about as different from each other as they can be. But I also enjoy jazz. I enjoy pop music. I remember back in the 80s I learned about 10 of Michael Jackson's songs because I thought they were so good. And Madonna had good songs. She actually had very good material. And so I've always just liked music. I like it in any form. And the stronger the emotion, the more it reacts to me. I explained to some people by saying take a piece of paper and you put your iron filings on it, and those sort of how you feel, and you hold a magnet underneath, and that's the music. And all of a sudden, everything lines up, and you get certain, the dopamine and the serotonin, whatever, flowing in your brain, and you're listening to this music, and you absorb its feelings. And I've always responded to that.
And that's really interesting because music has always been a very interesting stimuli. I used it when I used to wrestle. You can't believe that, but I used to wrestle. And music would get me fired up to go out on the mat. And
it impacts your feelings enormously.
Yeah, but then when you talked about just like Madonna and Michael Jackson, that got me thinking man, I really need to hear a good Phil Collins song right now. Because it's been too long since I've heard Phil Collins, or Lionel Richie for that matter. But going back, did you know it's Giving Tuesday?
Oh yes, I did my giving this morning.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Did you know that you could also give right now to the Symphony?
I can. Well, I'm in this conversation right now.
I mean, I can open up the donate button here on the iPad, and you can do it and let them watch. You can show them how to do it.
Do you want to give it a try? Fine, I've got my credit card.
Okay, so $4 million. You're good with that?
Sure.
See how easy? $4 million.
Put it in.
Yep, they're gonna match it now. I'm just kidding. That's why we need you to donate and hit that button.
I think the credit card company would have something to say about it.
I think they would too, actually. We have a question, though, from the audience. Our next question is coming from Kathy Villaruz. And she wants to know that often when you conduct from memory, why is that? And, how difficult it is to actually prepare and do that from memory, or is it just like second nature now?
That question leads into the training and what it is to be a conductor. Okay?
So who trained you?
My symphony conducting was mostly Igor Markevich, who is a conductor who made big-time career in Europe, say in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And one of his claims to fame was he did the first recording ever of The Rite of Spring for Angel Records. And he happened to be a student of my teacher, Mademoiselle Boulanger, much earlier than my time. And she told me the story that when she first met him, his father brought him to her keyboard class. Her keyboard class was 4 or 5 students standing around, and you played harmonies and talked about pieces and would analyze the compositions and make reference and give examples. And she said this young man came in, and she said, just sit over there and watch, and we'll see, how you feel about this material. He was 14.
Yeah.
And it happened at that time the keyboard class was studying a Bach fugue. And they were working through how the theme progressed through and whatnot. And she asked one of the students to play through the harmonies or to sit down at the keyboard and give an exposition of it. And the student was reluctant and was being shy, and she turned to and Igor Markevich interrupted and said, "I think I can do that." And she said he came over the piano and he played it, and it was an extraordinary talent. Well, she got to know him, and he studied with her, and he went on to make conducting career. But the other thing about in his upbringing was his father realizing what a gift he had, would, when he was 6 and 7 years old, would take him on walks in, the forest and whatnot, and they would play chess by memory.
Oh, wow.
When you're 7 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, he had a conducting school in Monte Carlo, and that's where I went to 3 summers.
Okay.
And it included conducting the Monte Carlo Symphony. That was part of the training and whatnot. Actually, that was the first time I stood in front of a large professional symphony. But in order to get up on the podium, you weren't allowed to have music. It meant you just had to know what you were doing.
Oh, okay.
Now, what that does psychologically, I've reflected on this over the years, it causes you to internalize it all and to really know what's going on. It's, in a way, it's not as hard as it sounds, but you have to love the music. Yeah. Mademoiselle would lead off saying, when she would say, can you play the opening of the Bach's First Prelude in the Well-Tempered Clavichord? Well, I practiced it last week, but I don't remember. And then she would say, I suppose on your wedding morning, you're going to roll over in bed and look at your new bride and say, what's your name? I mean, when you hear a C major chord, how can you forget it?
Right.
Isn't it important to you?
It's just part of you now.
Right. And that's what learning the scores at that level produces. Now, the one place where I conditionalize it is when I have a soloist that I may not be able to trust. I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay.
If they're playing without music, I've had a lot of adventures on the stage, and you can get soloists that aren't as well prepared as others. And sometimes I'll use the score with the soloist to make sure if anything untoward happens, I have a quick reference to know how to recoup.
Right.
But it's important that the conductor, to succeed well, know the work. And you can have the score in front of you. You can watch on YouTube. You can see all these videos nowadays of conductors. And a lot of times they're with music. Bernstein rarely used music. Almost never. But there is. He did for Sibelius' second. He has one where he's used it with the Sibelius Symphony. I saw in the video he was using a score. But you never really saw it. His eyes were always in the orchestra, and he would turn without looking down, kind of thing. And but he rarely. The other great conductors, Von Karajan, he doesn't. You go look at his videos; they're not using scores. But in order to conduct at that level, you better know what's going on. You just know.
And that's mind blowing to me. It's I'm going to check with the staff. Do we have any pictures out there? Any questions out there is what I meant to say.
Bryan, you mentioned you've had many adventures on the stage. Maybe tell us about one of your more interesting ones.
Well, one of the first that pops to mind was, it must have been 20 years ago. We were presented with a young artist. He was like 9 years old, and he was very good. And I gave him he was going to play a little Haydn piano concerto. And we rehearsed it. He did very well. I mean, there was a reason for him to be there. He was quite gifted. And but when the performance came, we started into it, and we got about halfway through the first movement, and he just went into the last movement. Just no breaking in the music. Just in his brain, he went to the and the orchestra knew the piece well. Everyone was flipping pages, and they finally found where he was, and we put it back together. Didn't stop. We just kept finally. It was a pretty simple accompaniment. And we got it put back together again. We tooled along for about another 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and then he went right back to where he had jumped and started playing. So we were flipping back to where it was, and we got to the end. I don't know if he ever was aware of what he was doing. It was how it had been set up in his brain cells. But I did get a letter from one of the audience saying, you might think to having a better prepared soloist in the future. I noticed that the audience noticed. And that's always an issue. Way back, Federal Way Symphony is not exactly a household word in King County. It's getting better known in Federal Way, but we're still not where we should be. But about 25 years ago, I was coming back from Russia. I'd gone there on a conducting trip, and I came back through customs. And in those days, they opened up your luggage and looked. They don't do that so much nowadays, but they went through your stuff, and there's all this music. And the guy said, "Oh, this music! What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm a conductor." And he said, "Well, what do you conduct?" He was really sort of confrontatory. And then I said, "Well, I conduct the Federal Way Symphony." He said, "Well, I'm from Federal Way. I've never heard of the Federal Way Symphony." I said, "Well, now you have."
There you go.
And then he said, well, when you get Pavarotti, maybe I'll come. And I thought, and I had enough. I said, if we get Pavarotti, his fee will be about $100,000, and we're playing in a facility that holds about 500 people. So do the math. You have to have at least $2,000 per ticket to recoup even your artist fee. Are you willing to pay $2,000 to hear Pavarotti live? Well, that's a little bit more. I said, you can tell me when we get Pavarotti, you'll come. But I don't know if you'd be able to sustain the money side of it.
Well, the good part is that with the link that they can click right above this video, they can donate money to hopefully get that in so we don't have to charge $2,000 a ticket.
Right.
I mean, that'd be great. Wow, that's, and you know, the last question, I mean, we're coming to the wrap here, but I had one more question for you, was that, you know, when you walk out, you know, when you're about to begin and you walk out, do you still get that feeling,
No.
that anxiety, that,
No.
that nervousness, nothing? No, it's just calm.
It's because we have very good players in the orchestra. And I trust them. When that downbeat goes, we're going to get to the end of the symphony or the work, whatever we're performing, in good form.
Yeah.
So I've performed with them enough that I don't get nervous about it. No, it's funny. I know that is an issue early on. And when I walk out there, my concern is, will the audience be receptive to what we're going to do? Will we be able to communicate with them through the music the greatness of what we're going to play? Yeah. I have a concern about that. That's where my thought, you know, like, and that requires that all the players are on the same page of music, that we coordinate, that we put this work together. And so I go out with I'm focused and I have a concern,
Yeah.
but I'm not nervous.
And see, that's the thing. Your passion for it is so infectious that it's awesome to hear that.
We have time for one more quick question. Chad O'Neill would like Maestro to know, who are your major influences?
What a question. Well, of course, my teachers. In fact, I had a 2-year period where I studied opera conducting in Cologne with a man who'd worked for 30 years in the opera house conducting. He had conducted The Marriage of Figaro like 180 times. He had all the dates written in his score. Well, to get into his class, you had to sit down and play through and demonstrate familiarity with the one scene in The Magic Flute where Tamino, the tenor, is being judged whether or not he can enter the temple of the, you know, that's opera's about the Masonic temple and whatnot. Yeah. And the priests come out and they sort of interview him on whether he's worthy to enter the temple. And my teacher used that little segment to proof the students that wanted into his class. Okay. It was a very subtle thing.
Yes.
Like, if you're going to come into this work, and this kind of work,
know what you're getting into.
Yes,
yeah.
And you have to be committed to it, and you have to respect it. Okay? And I've carried that through my whole life. And people ask me about what is my motivation now.
Right.
It's duty. It's duty to the art form and duty to the teachers and the people who pushed me along the way. Mm-hmm. I feel now is the time I provide payback, and I do it by showing these younger people in the orchestra and the people in the audience how this stuff goes. Okay?
How it's done.
Right, how it's done and how great it can be. And when to the level we execute on that, you know, the level of our execution is then the feeling of, have I done what I was trained to do? Because that's what my teachers expected of me. But there's people that I've known personally that influenced me, and there's people that I've just watched from afar that have influenced me enormously. And you read the histories, and you read the commentary. Wilhelm Furtwängler was asked. He was the great German conductor from, say, 1930 through mid-50s of the Berlin Symphony, all during the Second World War, and famous conductor for what he accomplished. And he was asked, what is his motivation? And his reply was, it's the character that's in the material that we're performing. It's the character. And so you put in, so I hear that and I think about that. I think, well, that's a great mind, a great musician, and that was his attitude, and that influenced me. Like, then I must find the character and project it.
And see, just hearing that brings back that part of the passion is so it radiates through, and I'm smiling because it's like hearing how excited he gets about that. It really it transfers over, and I guess to wrap up, thank you very much for taking some time and doing this, because it was super enlightening. It was super enlightening for me.
It's a pleasure.
And it was, I'm sure, super enlightening for everyone out there. Also, I need to thank our Facebook friends also for showing up today to our first Federal Way Symphony live Facebook event. I'm going to say it again because it's Giving Tuesday, and I'm going to keep repeating it. But hit that donate link right above in the title, and so the Federal Way Symphony can benefit not only the symphony itself, the community, the kids, everyone up and down the line deserves to benefit from the beauty the symphony brings, and especially with the great work that you do. Also, don't forget, this Sunday at 2 p.m. you can join us for our annual performance of Handel's Messiah. It's a holiday favorite, and tickets are available at fwpaec.org. That's the Federal Way Performing Arts and Entertainment Center, fwpaec.org. Or you can call 253-835-7010. Thank you out there for joining us, and thank you.